It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstein Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media business industrial complex. Today we're going to look at some of the foundations of those things and sort of futurecast into 2021. Steve, how you doing today?
A futurecast, I like that. Is that a term you just made up right off the top of your head, or have you seen that somewhere? We may have to copyright it.
It exists in the nerd circles I run in, so I cannot claim full responsibility.
In the nerd circles. I'm probably not too far off of your same nerd circles, though, to be honest. I shouldn't make fun of it. No, I'm doing okay. It's whatever side of the political aisle you lie on, I think everybody can agree that, thank God it's over, or at least part one is over, because I was so sick of all of them. I'm just glad I don't have to see another election ad for, another campaign ad for at least a year and a half. Thank God.
Unless you live in Georgia, apparently, because they're going to get inundated here in the next 6 weeks.
I don't know what is it with Georgia and runoff. I don't understand why we need runoff laws like Georgia has them. They're just begging for confusion and consternation by doing this. Like the two, what you're talking about, Chris, is the two Senate races. Yeah. Both, it looks like, are going to be runoffs. One of them because the guy who's ahead is like 0.05% below 50%. So we got to run off the same election that they just had. And the other one, they could have solved this problem. The second Senate race in Georgia has got like 20 people who all had votes, and they're all Republicans and Democrats. Just don't allow that. Make them nominate one person per party, and you won't have this problem. Georgia's a screwed up state, man.
Well, what we're learning, what we always learn in these situations, is that we have very wacky state by state laws about elections. So that's, I guess, part of what makes America a ugly, weird mess.
Well, yeah, and it's also good. I mean, as you know, I am a decentralize everything sort of person. And so the idea that there is one automaton in Washington, D.C. controlling every aspect of every election is a good thing. So, if you have a few states that has wacky and dumb election laws, it's better than one person or one body having ultimate control. So Georgia, I mean, you do you, I guess, Georgia, but I think you're making it abnormally difficult on yourself. And just, you're right. I mean, we're going to see how much money poured into Georgia in the next, I don't know when the runoff is, but
I think it's like January 6th or something. I mean, it's pretty quick.
It's going to be an all-out deluge, which is not going to be fun to have to live through, even being not in Georgia.
It's going to be white hot intense. That's for sure.
I took the Hogstein totally off of Twitter last weekend. Yeah, I just can't do it. I'm sorry, people. I can't do it. I will continue to advertise our content, but y'all are going to have to wait for the brilliant insights from me and Alex until this election stuff is over, because I can't do it another minute. I'm sorry.
Right. You're going to have to find a different source to find out what minutia practice squad moves have been made that week.
Well, see, but the Washington I refuse to use that term. Washington's PR team has a locked Twitter account that the media is on. They've only have 200 followers, all the media, and so we're on that. And so I can get notifications from that and get the official PR notices and roster stuff by at least paying attention to that at a minimum, and it'll be fine. And in terms of all the other stuff, I can just ignore it.
Speaking of November 3rd drama, obviously the presidential election is, was as advertised in terms of drama and made for TV events. But the NFL trade deadline, what a dud.
I didn't expect it to be anything but a dud.
No, I mean, that's normal, yes.
Yeah, every year people want to, or people are rooting for drama and big trades, and it never happens in the NFL.
We've had
It's not baseball.
no, the last couple of years it's been a little bit more active. I mean, still I would say pretty, not that big, but the trend has been a few more trades in the NFL. But this year, I mean, and some big names were definitely floated. I mean, the Will Fullers of the world, that would have been a pretty significant trade. But yeah, it was even more of it was normal dud. But I think even compared to the last couple of years, there were less moves.
Well, and that was partly because any players traded had to sit through the 6-day waiting period for the coronavirus stuff, and then we also have uncertainty in the salary cap, which kind of leads into our next topic, actually. But, I mean, the uncertainty in the salary cap coupled with you're going to lose a week of performance means that there's just not a ton of incentive to trade.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, the like sort of mandatory waiting room part of it, I think, definitely weighed heavy on some teams.
Yeah, and what are you going to do? Take on a huge $15 million a year contract right now when you don't know what the salary cap is going to be, next year? I mean, I think the combination of those things probably is what did the trade deadline. And certainly in Washington's case, Washington does not have a history of trade deadline stuff, really. And I'd never expected Ron Rivera, who didn't pursue many free agents in the offseason, to make some big trade when you're 2-5. I think y'all were dreaming if you expected him to do that. I mean, sure, he's going to take his players and do what he has to do to try to win a division, even a horrible division like the NFC East, but he's not going to go trade draft picks away for it when you're 2-5.
No, I was hoping we might get a couple mid-level draft picks back for like a Ryan Anderson or something. That was
yeah,
more what
we
I was
talked about
for.
it on the Hogsty. I mean, Ryan Anderson, sure, they probably should have done if they got an offer, but like Ryan Kerrigan was never going anywhere, never. He's too beloved in the front office to ever go anywhere.
Yeah, no, I always thought that one was a smokescreen. So that, as Steve mentioned, that's a good transition into what our kind of opening topic was. And normally we like to be pretty specific. There's a story, here's a angle, and unpack it. We're going to take a little bit of a different tact here and really kind of look at what we're seeing and what are the trend lines around what the sports landscape would be in 2021 here as the calendar ticks over, not that far away, a couple months, really, 6-8 weeks. So it's a real mystery, and we're starting to see some things clink into place. I think the players and the league have now tentatively agreed in the NBA on what a December 22nd kickoff, or what's it? I'm not sure.
Something like that. They want NBA for Christmas Day. That's the point.
Right. They got to have that day.
Yeah.
That's a big part of their calendar now for 25 years.
Yeah.
So that's a good little piece of evidence. But it is going to be wild and wacky about what these sports leagues do on a number of fronts. And also remember, there's things like a rescheduled Summer Olympics also sitting out there, which I'm already seeing NBC running ads for. What are some of your quick hot takes on what you're seeing in 2021?
Yeah, well, just as an aside, by the way, we'll do this story in the coming weeks whenever it happens, but there's an international court lawsuit pending against Russia regarding the Russian drug doping in the Russian Olympic team, and that decision is supposedly going to come out like this year. And I'm not sure what court it's in front of, but the result of that could mean that the entire Russian team is banned from the Olympics. So watch for that. But yeah, anyway, big picture things. I think the first and most important thing to all these leagues is how many people are they going to be allowed to have in the stands. That's the most important thing for all of them. The NBA has, there was a story out just today this week, talking about how much money the NBA is going to lose next season if they don't get 72 games in, and it's billions of dollars. But I think the first and most important trend we'll see is that there'll be more and more people in the stands. Because I don't want to get political here, and I'm not picking sides, but I think the whole coronavirus thing became very ramped up for political reasons. And now that that's kind of over, whatever side you're on, I think we're going to see less and less coronavirus-related hysteria And I think the political leadership in states will be more inclined to sort of open things up because it's not a political football anymore, or at least it won't be here in the next few weeks. So I think what we'll see as a trend across all leagues and all sports is more and more fans being allowed in stadium. That's, I think, the most important thing we'll see. The other trend, scheduling wise, the NFL is the only league that got lucky with their schedule, and they may lose. I'm still not convinced they won't lose a week, necessarily, but they have the bye week before the Super Bowl to make it all up. But the NBA, Major League Baseball, and hockey all had their schedules completely thrown up. You just mentioned it, Chris. December, whatever it is, start for the NBA. That's more than a month late. And so that it endangers the start dates for next season. Unless you want to do a condensed off season. So that's a big trend. But I think the most important trend is we're going to see a significantly more fans in the stands. Like some states, the less coronavirus affected we'll see 100% capacity early in the year, I think.
Yeah, I mean the NHL would already be playing, so they've also already missed this. I mean, they had made a decision a couple months ago to not start the new season in 2021. So it's not
Basketball would be in training camp right now.
Right. So we're already seeing delays. I agree with you and disagree with you. I agree with you in that butts and seats will be one of the major factors here. I don't think the pandemic is going to slow down. The science data would suggest otherwise. So I agree that you probably see. Now that doesn't mean you don't have some. Yes, there are varying degrees. And quite frankly, right now, where it's the worst in the United States, there's not necessarily where you have big sports teams anyway. So I think, similar to where in 2020, getting stuff on TV was the prime directive, right? Bring these leagues back, get them on TV, salvage how much the TV contract money you could, finish off a season. Those were the grand imperatives. I do agree that in 2021, getting people in the seats, and if they can get people in the seats and at enough volume, will be the grand imperative. That may not happen, but I think, especially for baseball and especially for hockey, those of the four major sports, those need gate receipts the most. They're more local, regional sports. They rely heavily on the in-game experience and the fan revenue. They have different revenue models at the league level, so they keep more of that money. And there's some people in both leagues that say if they can't hit a certain revenue line from in-game revenue, then it may make more financial sense for them to take a season off. I mean, that's the conversation in those two leagues that they're having right now.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned that a couple shows ago, and I think it was the NHL that was the context I think we mentioned it on. That just blew me away. And because if you think about it, you're absolutely right, and I probably have the same view, because I think the 2020 season was, let's just get through it. We can take a little loss for this season. Let's just get through it and get it done. Try to salvage as much as we can. And that's how we ended up with things like shortened season and arguments with the players about what, kind of salary reductions they're going to have. The leagues took massive hits. And I have some numbers, as a matter of fact. This is from Front Office Sports, dated November 3rd. Here's the 2019-20 lost NBA revenues. $8.3 billion in total season revenue, drop of $1.5 billion or 10%. So they lost 10% despite having a 70-something game season. They still lost $1.5 billion. $800 million in lost gate receipts, $400 million in lost sponsorship and merchandise sales, and then $200 million in what Front Office Sports calls net negative impact from tensions with China. And what that is you go back to 9 months ago now. That's the whole Daryl Morey free Taiwan, isn't that what it was? Free Hong Kong was this thing. The fallout from that, Front Office Sports at least claims that was a $200 million hit from that. So that's the NBA. I think that um, I don't. Surprisingly, I think you're right. That surprisingly, I think some of these leagues might just decide to fold up the tent instead of continuing on if they can't get full fans in the stands. But that having said, I think there are states that are leaning that way already. Like Texas and Florida in particular already are allowing, significant capacity in stadiums, for example. And it's not going to be too long before it's going to be 100%. We can argue about the medical, science of that, or the how wise that is. But I think the bottom line is that's what those states are going to do. But other states like California just isn't going to have it. They're just not. New York, you can speak to New York, Chris, but I don't think California and New York are going to have significant fans and stands, even early next year. So that's the key number one thing. And the other thing, the schedule part. How long are these leagues going to want to have a condensed schedule? The NFL has gotten away with it. Golf and baseball will be back to a full schedule. It's really basketball and hockey that are the ones most affected by the schedule. So hockey is the one, Chris, that I think you could see potentially them just shutting it down. I don't think
Oh,
baseball will do it.
no, I think they'll. I agree. I think there'll be a move. I think some owners will push for it in baseball. I think it'll be a conversation. I ultimately don't think that will happen, but it's on the table. The other thing that's on the table in the NHL that I know they talked about is doing an all Canada year, where they just basically give all teams an adopted Canadian. I mean, it's not going to be obviously near the capacity, and you don't have local fans. So, but if they just did their season in Canada, and everyone just has a adopted home city and rink, basically, that's one thing that I know that they have talked about.
I have not paid any attention to how how the Canadian government has responded to the coronavirus pandemic. So I do not know. I have no idea their rules with regard to public gatherings. I'm assuming from the fact that you're saying this that their rules are more lax than ours.
Well, I just think well, first of all, it's just I mean, as big as
It's a
Canada
big
is,
open place. It's a big
yeah,
open place.
just does
Yeah.
not have that many people compared to the United States. So you just have a nationwide population density difference.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how dense the population is, does it? What matters is you're going to have 20,000 people in an arena. No matter, you can put it in the middle of Saskatchewan, and it doesn't matter.
Right.
The effect issue is the same.
But their outbreak has been significantly more controlled, although apparently Toronto might take a turn. And remember, they didn't even let you. If you remember correctly, they didn't. Toronto Blue Jays did not play in Toronto this year.
Right.
So we'll see. I think that's a. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but I know and have read that is one of their. That's one of the contingencies that they're playing out if they're going to try to get a season in. Um,
It's not a
yeah,
bad. It's not a bad. I mean, idea really. Um, I mean, American cities wouldn't be happy, but who cares? And the TV will be the same. Um, Other sports, like I said, I think golf is going to be back to a full and normal schedule. But golf, of all the major sports, I think golf is the one that's least affected by fans. I'm sure they do make some money off of it, um, but I think it's by far TV revenue for golf would be my guess. And so even if I don't think they really care so much if they have fans there, to be perfectly honest. I mean, so I think golf will have a full normal regular season with some fans there in some locations, some not. The NFL will have a full regular season. Some stadiums will be at 100% capacity. Others, like the state of California and whatnot, probably not. Um, Baseball, I think, will have a 162 game schedule. I think, but again, I mean, depends on how much gate revenue they're willing to lose, I guess. But I think if I could summarize 2021, it will, in one sentence, I think it will be the return to normalcy. That's what the goal will be for everyone, for every sport, will be to try to get back to as much normal as possible. And I think it'll take really till the 2022 season until we see back to 100% normal as everything was.
I mean, I know they're hemorrhaging money, but All these sports leagues, the smartest thing they could do would be to call up all whatever the top 3 or 4 drug manufacturers working on therapeutics and vaccines and say, how much money do you need from us?
Well,
Yeah.
it's. I mean, I don't know what the truth is because the vaccine thing became a real political football, and so everybody's lying and all of that. So I don't know the truth of how close they really are to a vaccine. Because again, one side would say we're not close at all, and the other side would say, said it was, it's almost here and this and that. So I'd really like someone now that we will soon be out of the presidential election. I'd really like somebody to tell the public for sure what exactly is the truth. How close really are we? Because you're right. I mean, yeah. I mean, if I were a sports league, that's what I would do. How fast can we get everybody vaccinated? How much money do you need? We'll do it.
Because the other piece is here, and we've seen this in other businesses, is one thing to open. And so movie theaters, restaurants are good examples of this.
Have you been to a movie theater? I have.
No.
I've been to a couple. I've been a couple times. It's it was this. The experience was for me. There were fewer people there, obviously, and the food cost was half of what it was. Which I wasn't ready for that, but it was about the same and normal experience. But go ahead. Sorry.
In New York, you can actually rent one for not that much. You can basically you can basically like say, hey, and me and 10 people want to take the theater, and it's only like $200.
Because they're that desperate for
Yeah.
income.
Yeah, so you basically just rent the theater for you and your friends.
And do what if you can't watch a movie though?
No, you watch a movie. You just like get your own screening.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, which probably especially if you pooled you and your 10 friends, probably it was cheaper than if you had done that 12
If you
months
just
ago.
bought 10 tickets with with food and drinks, yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, my point is, there's one thing to open, there's another thing to get people to go, and that's what we've seen in some of these. So, and that you can't plan for that, right? Because it's not systems, it's not messaging, it's not. People have to, that goes back into everyone's individual decision making, and their risk tolerance and all those kind of things, which doesn't neatly fall across political lines and whatnot. It's like, so it's one thing to say you can come. It remains to be seen if people will come, and the trend is that they don't.
So far.
Yeah.
So far. But again, I think if you let a few months pass, you get the political hysteria out of the equation, and then it becomes a simple medical thing. Because again, right now, I do think the politics of this have greatly ramped up the consternation in the American public. It's one side is it's by political party. And I think that's going to go away. Thank God. And I just tell you from my part, I won't have any qualms about going to any sporting event. I'd go to all of them. But that's me. I'm kind of like that. I think that people will slowly get back to normal. Okay, I do. I think if by the middle of the year, summer 2021, I think we're gonna see, in terms of sports, basically full capacity in all places in which it's allowed.
We'll see. I don't necessarily agree, although I agree that they'll push. I agree that will be the push. That will be the goal. And we'll see.
So you don't think the public's gonna go for that?
I don't. I not to now. A segment of the public will. You can 100x or 1000x you, and those people will come. But it remains to be seen. And I think the interesting part will be like, even in an open scenario, are they getting the numbers that they need? And that is going to be a big question. And it's not just it's not just simply whether it's open or closed. It's whether even in open are people going to come.
Yeah, I mean, now the other part to the 2020 forecast is broadcast television. I think we've hit the COVID, the coronavirus response stuff, but the future is also on broadcast in broadcast rights, and the NFL is in the middle of network broadcast negotiations right now. ABC is in it again, but I mean, in this next round of negotiations, how much are we going to see the streaming rights become the preeminent package to buy? Are we really going to see legitimately see like the Amazons and the Hulus of the world bid for main broadcast rights for NFL football games and all the other sports? I think we will not see that in next year. I think it's going to take another round of contracts before we get to that point. So I think we're going to mostly see in the NFL next year that the main networks are going to grab all the rights, and there will be streaming rights, but the main broadcast packages are going to be what we always see. I think it'll take one more round before we get to alternative programming becomes a reality.
I think, yes, I would agree. I mean, I think especially, and in fact, I actually think in this case, we've talked a lot about COVID accelerating things, or allowing entities to do things that they had a longer time span on quicker. But I actually think here, to your point, COVID actually slows down some of that because, especially, and here we really are talking football, because that's so essential, and not just to one side, to all sides. So I think it does probably calcify those sort of big network contracts. But what I find interesting is what I think will happen with the streamers is you'll see these bundled deals, or you'll see access opened up. So we already see that this has already been around for a couple years now, I believe, with Amazon having like a simulcast, basically rights on Amazon Prime on the Thursday games. And this year, this snuck up on me. I'm this Hulu watching live sports on Hulu. You might these endless Baker Mayfield commercials, which is like, is Baker Mayfield a good enough player for a national pitchman?
Give him another year, he'll be gone.
yeah. I find that bizarre on the ad agency side, but whatever. But this, so I'm not even exactly sure how it works because I don't need it. But I think what Hulu can do now, because Hulu is basically owned by, I believe, NBC and Fox, or it has some weird network co-ownership piece, that they're allowing, since you can watch local channels on Hulu now with certain account access, you can actually watch network broadcasts on Hulu, and that's been a huge advertising push for Hulu this year. If you've watched 10 minutes of football, you know that. So I think we might see more of those things where those streamers can broadcast, simulcast, basically. And I think we'll see more of that, the expansion of that. That still is in network control. It's still network first. But I think we're already seeing it bleed out.
Okay. Here's why I said, here's why I'm talking about, here's why we're talking about this. Amazon's market cap, you know what it is? You want to take a guess? I've been staring at my phone trying to figure it out when you were talking. You want to take a guess at Amazon's market cap?
Well, I mean, I know you can count it in the billions, probably, right?
Oh no, 1.7 trillion.
Wow. Wow.
Unless I'm reading what I read wrong, $1.7 trillion. That's as big as any company in the world, okay? I mean, in broad simple terms, that's like Disney level. I don't know what Disney's market cap. By the way, definition of market cap, for those of you who are wondering, market cap is how you measure the size of companies. The commonly accepted measure of how you measure the size of publicly traded companies. And so the market cap is the value of all the outstanding stock. So that's what Amazon's is. And I was sitting here trying to find Comcast, because Comcast and NBC Universal, and even if it's in that, first of all, I think certainly NBC Universal is probably less. So that's truly gigantic. And Apple's up there too, So these streaming companies, they're going to make the networks. I mean, fast forward 5 years from now, these network broadcast companies are going to be dead. I'm convinced. At this point, I'm convinced. They might not be completely dead and gone, but their days as the preeminent form of broadcast television are just going to be gone. Because Amazon is just too ginormous. Google is too huge. Google. I bet you Google's market cap is up there too.
Oh, sure.
Up there that size. Um, and they can at some point they can just stomp these networks out of existence. They really can't. Disney, yeah, okay, Disney's huge, but is, I mean, Disney is just hemorrhaging money. Disney is Disney got their throat slit, and they're bleeding out on the sidewalk right now. I don't think Disney's in any position to spend tons and tons and tons of money. If you ask me, they might do it anyway. And again, I read that ABC's bidding for NFL rights. But I just think it'll take another round. But the next round of broadcast rights, it's going to be Amazon and Google bidding for the main broadcast rights and streaming it on their various services.
Oh yeah, that is definitely coming, and you can already tell in terms of the networks. It's so antiquated, but the big three, or even if you want to count it as big four, although the Fox big version of Big Four is already splintered. They've already sold off parts and stuff. It's not nearly
Yeah.
But anyway, let's talk about the big four.
Disney bought up a bunch of that.
So you already see their moves, right? NBC has launched the Peacock, CBS has All Access, and ABC is Disney, so they already have those pieces. You can already see their movement towards establishing themselves as content brands, not networks. And then in that scenario, what probably happens is those big players buy those brands. Like you could easily see like a Google buying the NBC brand in all of its content, and keeping those things because they have deep value at that point. But they aren't going to be over the top broadcast networks. They'll be content holdings.
Yeah. And by the way, Google's market cap, I didn't realize Google is now Alphabet Inc. in terms of the parent company. I had forgotten about all that, but they're at like 1.1 something trillion for market cap. So there you go. I'm telling you, that's bigger than anyway, that's as large a company as you'll ever see in the world. So yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that it's certainly going to be a package deal. Don't misunderstand me. But I just think that for the right here and now, there's entirely too much risk involved, and there's too much uncertainty in the sporting world to do anything but what they've already been doing. So for the here and now, we're going to see, in the case of the NFL, Fox, CBS, and or ABC and NBC are going to be the main broadcast sources. But I just think you fast forward 10 years from now, I don't know if those networks will A, exist, or B, have the chutzpah to even bid and win for broadcast rights like that.
And having these broadcast rights just makes them more attractive for a sale, right? So if I'm NBC and I still own or have my broadcast rights to the NFL, and an Apple comes along, that makes and Apple wants to. Actually, Apple doesn't want to direct. They'd rather buy. Some ways, they might rather buy NBC that comes along with NFL broadcast rights, and they would be to necessarily compete with NFL broadcasting rights because the name of the game is consolidation and content. So it actually makes some of these entities more attractive for a big acquisition to continue to own these crown jewel rights.
That's a good point. Like I'm like Mr. Market Cap here. Apple, you want to take a guess? Apple's market cap?
$2 trillion.
2 trillion. It is 2 trillion. Yeah, so it might. You're right. Maybe it's just cheaper for them just to buy an entire network outright. Let's just buy CBS instead of bidding directly for NFL or NBA or what have you. Broadcast rights. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's just buy the entire network, and they could do it and not even blink. I mean, buy the whole network for $100 billion, and they could find that in their couch cushions.
Disney's essentially already doing that. I think they kind of, well, I mean, it's obviously a little bit more strategic, but I think they've kind of fallen into that model. I don't think it was necessarily a full strategy. And they're, as your point earlier, their business model is so spread out, and that they're taking just a giant hit with basically their parks. That's what's causing them to lose money.
Well, and their movie
Right.
Division two.
Anything that relies somewhat on an in-person experience, which if you're that
Right.
leveraged, you're going to take damage on. But the thing that the thing that stuck into my mind about Apple, just to show you how ginormous it is. This is a couple years ago. This is pre-pandemic, blah blah blah. There were rumors that they had to spend money because they had too much cash. It was negative to them on a
God.
number of levels. That they were considering two possible purchases: Disney and Netflix. So if you're
Holy
talking,
moly.
so if you're talking about, and I think calmer heads prevailed at the time within Apple, but that probably just becomes more attractive. If you're talking about Apple basically needing to buy Disney as a tax shelter, that's crazy.
But that's just blows my mind, man. Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Disney's market cap 230 billion.
Right. So I mean, you could look at those two market caps. It
You could buy Disney and not blink.
yeah.
Buying Disney as a tax shelter, which, given the losses that Disney's suffering, that's a perfect tax shelter.
Yeah.
Just hemorrhaging money. Oh my God, that's unbelievable. So all we're saying here is that's the future. Okay, it might not be 2021 because of the craziness that's going on with the health related stuff and whatnot, but at some point in the future, these tech companies, unless they get broken up by the by the federal government, which could happen, because at some point it is a monopoly. If you just own if three companies own the entire world, the federal government is not going to put up with that. At any side of the political aisle, both sides of the political aisle will put the kibosh if they own too much. But absent that happening, yeah, those are your new giants. It used to be years ago. It was manufacturing company like GM, and there were some others. But now it's these tech companies. In an absence of the government breaking them up, that's the future.
Yeah.
For sure.
So
But I do
crazy
think
stuff.
I do think though that the federal government's going to probably break up Google at some point. Google at least.
I would agree, and I actually would agree that they should. The devil's in the details on all that stuff, obviously, all the time. But I think I agree. I mean, to me, big tech, which I've got a critical analysis of, but I'm not hard anti or pro. But big tech to me looks less like your industrial giants of the second half of the 20th century, and actually looks more like the industrial giants of the early part of the 20th century.
That were really too big and too powerful.
And we're broken up, and we're kind of the impetus for a lot of our modern laws around these things. So, yeah, I think there'll be a reckoning for sure there at some point.
Yeah, I do too. So, okay, well, I think that's the future, don't you? You want to move on real quick to our ESPN story?
Yeah, which isn't too cut off from this conversation in terms of what the sports landscape is going to be. So interesting because you probably heard about there was, I think, another pretty large round of layoffs at ESPN. Was it 500 people? I think wasn't it? What was the number?
Yeah. You talking about the early one? The early ones?
Yeah.
The early one I think was fun.
Right?
Yeah, they've had two big rounds of layoffs. The first one was 350, and then there was another 100. This one is going to be 300 jobs. So there's a story. Front Office Sports has this, again, my favorite site, November 5th, 2020 by Michael McCarthy. They're cutting 300 people. Now, and again, that's on the head of the prior layoffs, one of which was 350. The other one was 100. Now, what's interesting about this, I mean, I'm always in favor of beating up on ESPN, but what's interesting about this is who they're cutting. Who they're cutting, for the most part, are the remote production staff. This was fascinating to me. Didn't know about this. If you guys aren't aware, ESPN has been broadcasting most sports games remotely now, meaning that the broadcast crews stay in Bristol and are not traveling to the game sites. And so all these remote staffs are just being cut because they don't need them anymore. I did not know that was happening. And even, I'm talking about even the announcers. Even the announcers are doing it from Bristol, and presumably, if they need a shot like a background shot of the announcers, they just throw up some graphics behind them. You know, so that's the staffs who's being cut. And if nobody notices, you brought this up pre-show, Chris. If nobody notices, this is going to be the wave of the future. Why move 100 people in trucks to wherever, Miami or somewhere, if you don't have to, and if the public isn't going to even notice? Fascinating.
And we're seeing, it's really fascinating. We've talked about this has been a theme basically on the show since COVID hit, that this is accelerating lots of cost cutting measures that probably were already in some upper tier management's planning portfolio anyway. But you really look at, like, do we need an NFL broadcast crew rolling into town is like Metallica or the Rolling Stones coming to your arena. I mean, it's giant trucks, it's giant pieces of equipment, it's people on the ground. I think what we're finding is you just don't need that. Now you might have even needed it 5 or 10 years ago, but the speed of technology on how to do this is just this has nothing to do with COVID. This technology was already there. It was already coming. You just don't need the overhead. And what does every business try to do? They try to increase margins, right? They try to bring, especially if sales are going to be static. What's your way to continue to make money is to reduce your overhead, and that's what they're doing here. That's and if it's the old technology versus human power. We've had tall tales going back 200 years in this country about this. What's the hammer versus the machine to cut through the mountain, all that stuff. That's what's happening here. And these networks are like, we don't need to spend this overhead.
Yeah, I mean, in for those of you who don't know, at one point in time, I did major concert backstage setup. I was basically a roadie for a time, and I worked for a lot of big bands, and that is, it's what now, back then, this is going back a long ways, but that was 5 or 6 trucks for even a mid-sized band, and now you're talking about, for major concert stuff, 20 semis, and that's what they need for major football games, is a whole bunch of semis, a humongous local crew, and a whole bunch of local crew to set all that stuff up. It took an entire day to do that for even mid-sized bands, and it's the same thing for these football games. They could cut, they could cut literally hundreds of people. They could cut literally hundreds of people by not doing the remote broadcast, and then just have a skeleton crew to set up the remote cameras, basically. And the fact of the matter is, I think the broadcast team, like the Troy Aikmans of the world, probably have a better view in a studio from monitors than live. Than live watching with binoculars, which presumably they were doing. If you just have every camera shot available in a studio to you, I think they could do a better job of calling the game than they could sitting there watching it from 200 feet up, or however much it is.
Totally agree. And and as we talked about, like, the consumer experience doesn't change. We don't even know. I mean, things like deep fakes and just like how much you can, basically how much reality you can create with video now. I mean, they cut to Troy Aikman and whatever, hair plug boy, what's his name?
His podcast partner.
Yeah,
the name's escaping me right now.
The son,
that guy.
Yeah. Which the funniest thing about him ever was
Jack Buck, right?
Yeah,
Joe Buck.
When he claimed that he was addicted to hair plugs in his book, that was mind blowing. Anyway, they can make them look like they were from broadcasting from anywhere, right? Like the feel of it from the consumer side, you don't know. Like with the digital technology they have now, they could be, they could have them on Jupiter and you wouldn't know.
They also, I mean, they've been broadcasting fan crowd noise all year. If everybody doesn't realize this, they were they were piping in fan noise in every NBA game, in every football game. and trying to make it as realistic as possible. And the truth of the matter is, I really hated it at first, but the truth of the matter is, by the end, didn't really notice. I don't know if the NBA did. I didn't watch any NBA games this year, so I was for various reasons. So I don't know if the NBA was doing that or not. Presumably they were, but you can fake the crowd noise. You can fake the broadcast team location. You can fake everything. Hell, you could fake the game if you really wanted to. They could create, they could broadcast a fake game if they wanted to. So, they could. Madden is realistic enough now. They could probably broadcast Madden if they wanted. So, but yeah, no. Anyway, I think that's the wave of the future. It cuts costs. Like I said, it cuts all the local crew. It cuts the travel costs. It cuts the hassle of moving all these people all around the country. It's definitely the wave of the future. I think the days of broadcast teams being at stadiums locally is dead forever.
Yeah. One thing I found funny around you can tell that the NFL crowd noise artists, let's call them that, have gotten better since the season has started because
Yeah.
in the first couple weeks you're like they would just basically hit like noise when you
Hit play.
Yeah. Now and if you're a really astute football watcher, especially on TV, a live crowd almost sometimes tells you stuff about the game, right? Because sometimes they see a referee react earlier than the TV cameras will, so that So there was a lot of nuance about what the crowd was telling you what was going on in the game.
No, I noticed that there's like a commander in chief of crowd noise in the studio now, and he or she is definitely following along, and you even hear like the crowd booing a bad call now, and
they've gotten better.
It's all fake, people. Yeah. It's all fake.
They've learned their job here in the first 9 weeks or whatever it is. So, that's I don't like it either, but I've gotten used to it. You just get used to it. Yeah, so we'll see a lot more of this, and some of it's innovation, some of it's playing defense, and some of it's just the trend lines anyway. Our last story here is kind of another interesting COVID fall out, but maybe this is a COVID fall up. And I would imagine we're going to talk about golf, and not golf as a not the PGA, but golf as a recreational activity. You notice what I did there? But anything that's outside and active and relatively safe, and outside by definition, it appears is more safe, is seeing an uptick. And golf, in terms of its, especially because golf, you need stuff. Golf is not a cheap outdoor recreational activity. So we're seeing a spike in golf sales, right?
Yeah. This is once again Front Office Sports. For those of you who love sports business stuff, and you have to be if you're listening to us, Front Office Sports is certainly a good place to look. Okay, here's some numbers. Rounds played through September are up 8.7% since last year. 331 million in August golf equipment sales, record for that month. Bill Murray's golf brand apparel. I didn't know he had a golf brand apparel called William Murray. Sales grew 150% compared to last September. Third quarter golf equipment sales up 18% than the previous quarterly record. So golf is setting a record. Golf is not just having a good year. Golf is having their best year ever. And I think it's because, number one, people are sick of being inside, and golf is a good way to get outside and still be relatively healthy, even however paranoid you are about it. You're away from everybody but the people in your golf group, whether 1, 2, 3, or 4. So it's a safe way, even if you're most concerned about it. And it's a way to get outside and do something. Listen, anytime you can get people away from their computers and away from their TVs and outside doing anything, it's better for society as a whole because it's healthy. It's, you're not cooped up. That's a great thing. So I didn't know golf was having such a boom, which is why I wanted to bring it up.
I probably could have. It makes sense. It's not surprising, but I wouldn't have known that either. And I bet you, we don't have the numbers in front of us, but I bet you if you looked at things like hiking shoes, kayaks, skis, things like, I think you'd probably see very similar trends in other kind of similar outdoor athletic activities.
Yeah, I mean, we're heading into the prime ski season, so that's going to peak now. But yeah, I bet you if we can measure hiking, I bet you hiking is having a tremendous boom right now. Again, there's no way to possibly measure it except maybe hiking apparel or whatever.
Shoe sales.
But all that Yeah, all that stuff I think is undergoing a boom now because I think society as a whole is just sick and tired of being cooped up. I think they really are, and this is for if any politician is listening, locking people down for months at a time. Forget the forget the politics of it and the economic impact of it. That's just not healthy for people. And so I think people want to get outside more, and this golf thing is an example of that.
And anecdotally, I know that anybody that I know that plays golf on a regular basis or considers himself a golfer has seen they've golfed probably 3 to 5 times more in this stretch than they would have normally.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what the numbers suggest. I'm not. I like golf, but I'm in a catch-22 about golf personally because I'm a terrible golfer, and if I wasn't a terrible golfer, I would play more. But it would take me playing more to not be a terrible golfer. So it's this catch-22 thing. I play once or twice a year, but I would go out a lot more if I could stay in the fairway, but I can't, so I don't. Look, listen. Hour after hour of playing in the rough and in the trees is no fun.
right.
you know but it would take hour after hour for me to be able to hit the ball straight consistently, and I can't, so I don't, but I don't, so I can't.
I just don't like it. So, and I've tried a few times, and every time it's abject failure.
Golf is a lot of fun. I played last weekend and ended up in the rough,
Yeah,
surprisingly.
you went for a
Played
walk
with
in the
my
woods.
dad. And I don't think my dad's listening to this, but played with my dad, and he was shocked at how many balls I lost. Because I live in a different part of the country than my father, so I don't get to play as much as I probably would. He's obviously 30 years older than me, and he can still hit the ball straight every time. And so for him, it's just getting out there and hitting, and for me, it's like the ball going everywhere, and it's just awful. So, but be that as it may, it's a boom of outdoor. I guess the point is, it's a boom of outdoor activities that are no doubt a direct result of the coronavirus pandemic.
For sure. So, some industries rise, some industries maintain, and some industries crumble.
Yeah,
It's the way of the world in
that's it.
general.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there we go. We'll bring that'll be our coda here for the show today. Steve, what is happening in the broader Hogsty universe outside of a playoff run?
Well, don't get me started. I could do an hour on this. Just please don't. Okay, so we are in full season swing here with the Hogsty. We're doing our regular game previews and game recaps. Seasons of Discontent was off for the bye week, so that will be back. That's Rick Snyder's look at all things Washington, D.C. sports and life, and we have all of our regular written content.
All right, so go to is the hogsty.net? Is that what it is?
No, it's a hogsty.com.
Thehogsty.com. So go there for all that excellent written content, and we will see you in 2 weeks.